Today is the second talk, the second day of the August 86 retreat. We'll start out with a few things that usually come up during an opening talk. I was reminded that they hadn't come up, so here they are. One is about motionlessness while sitting. This does not refer to listening to a talk. I think at the end of the talk yesterday we said, feel free to change the posture if it becomes too uncomfortable. But during our regular rounds of sitting, if one wishes to be in the sitting room, can we all agree not to move? In the mind, this may bring up the specter of discipline. Or something artificial that we're imposing upon ourselves. But if one goes along with it, one may find that this is an astonishing thing. So many people sitting together and being quiet together. We're doing it to provide for each other the utmost stillness. There's still all kinds of sounds, mechanical sounds of furnace fans and doors, people going to the meeting or leaving the meeting, going to a bathroom or outside. They're all the natural sounds. The branches and leaves brushing against each other in the breeze. The insects and birds. The distant hum of the traffic. But to listen to all of that out of a common stillness. It's an amazing thing. Can it happen without making anything out of it, without creating the concept of, without creating a concept or an image about oneself doing it, just not moving, even though the urge is there to move. And with this we come to another interesting thing that can be found out if one does not move, being under great pressure to move, because there's a pain in the knee or back or leg or neck, or a fly has landed on the nose and is exploring the way into the eye, or just walking up and down the arm. Sometimes if one looks, it's not a fly at all, it's just a skin response. What would one do about that? But the fly one has to brush off or shake off. It's a habit. The fly comes back. So to sit when something happens physically, to which by old habit we're used to make a response, do something about it, get rid of it. to not do that, and therefore maybe for the first time become intimate with the stimulus, with the pain, the tension, the stress, the tickling. If we can't do anything about it, then maybe we can look at it, what it is, in a friendly way. Never have had that opportunity before because our habits take over immediately, normally. A cramp in the leg means one has to step on it, jump on it or something. A crick in the neck means one has to sort of do a yoga exercise. It may or may not remedy it. But what is this thing right now? If I don't approach it with my habitual responses. Going further, if I realize I don't know this thing, I don't know this pain, the tension, as it's actually occurring right now. All I know is my past remembrances of similar pains, and to those I react. Do you see the difference? Whether one says, oh yeah, this is this again, and it's going to get worse and worse, and then the writhing in its presence, or to honestly wonder what it feels like. Without taking any action. Just the action of awareness, which is complete action. Now, as one sits in this room, if there is the sound of someone moving, how does one listen to it? Someone changing a posture. Rustling of some clothes or whatever. Can one listen to that without any reaction? Or does the thought come up, why does he or she move if we have agreed not to move? If everybody did it, what would it, and so forth? Is the mind filled with ideas about it? Or can one see the reaction arising and be done with it before it has arisen, before it has taken over the mind? See it so thoroughly that it is finished. So what starts out as a slight noise outside becomes voluminous noise in the mind. We didn't talk about eating before. Often people say while sitting it's so difficult to know what is awareness, what are thoughts. Or thoughts say, I'm aware, or you're not aware, and then the confusion. Is thought right? But There's certain things that happen during the day, like eating and working, in which one can really see or feel something directly, unambiguously. No confusion. You hold a cold bowl in your hand. That's not a thought, is it? That's there. The weight of it, the texture, the temperature, the pressure on the palm, it's there. And then ladling the soup, the feel of the ladle, this green and red stuff sort of whirling around as one mixes it. Can one see that, or does one only think, will I get enough? Because the level is quite low. That's something to observe too. Arriving at a low level of soup. What thoughts arise in the mind? Not just in the mind, the whole body is one stream of wanting that stuff before it's gone. Maybe dishing out more than one would have taken if the level had been higher. So the pouring of that warm stuff into the cold bowl and the feel of the bowl warming, it's all real. If the mind isn't preoccupied with thoughts about how much or how little, or I don't like this soup, or to see that there one can see so clearly what is thought and what is direct perception. Dropping the white stuff into the green stuff, and whatever one puts on top, the bread. Has one ever looked at half a slice of bread in a basket, little holes and some nuts, a raggedy edge, the feel of the bread in the fingers? And sitting down with it. Not, now I must be attentive, but what is it like? We must nothing. We're just doing things. And are we aware of what we're doing? It's an amazing thing if there is awareness. As the spoon touches the lips, the mouth, the stuff in the mouth, the taste of it, the warmth, the swallowing. If one feels a rush to get more, one may swallow before one has tasted or chewed. That may be a habit. There's no right way of eating, but only finding out how it is that one is eating. And maybe something will change in this light of awareness without any instructions on how to do it. Because the body has its own wisdom. If left alone and free from pressure of ideas and habits. So many of us have eaten under pressure all our lives. As little children, it's one of the first pressures coming at us. Eat up. And something that's most natural and enjoyable for many little children becomes a drudgery and a battlefield. Or one can't get enough of it. There's the anxiety, I won't get enough. Or I've got to go to work, to school, and just gulping the stuff down, which becomes also a conditioned response to food, gulping it down, getting it over with, or gulping it down so one can gulp down some more. Also, all of us very conditioned to, while we're eating, to read something. Almost seems to go together like potatoes and gravy. The eyes sort of roam for an intake too, not just the mouth. Even if it's just a cereal box on the table, the cereal makers know that. The eyes gazing for something interesting to read and maybe to get. Little children, that's how they learn to read often. So here, we've asked people not read in the balcony or dining room in the public areas. If one is used to that, it's something amazing to just eat without feeding the eyes at the same time with printed matter. Because if one sits in the balcony, there's this incredible view which is changing all the time. It's never the same from one moment to the next. Is one looking at that greedily to take it in, or is it just there? So that the looking and what's there are not two separate things. Just as the soup in the mouth is there, to be tasted, felt, swallowed, with no obstruction. Obstruction being thought, moving someplace entirely different. A third topic is work during the day. Have some work in different places, different times. Here too, our ingrained habits can have a chance to be discovered. Our habit to work in order to get it done, in order to be done with it, get it over with. So one is either free for the next task or free for something that one would like to do rather than work. It has become, for most of us, an autonomous habit to work in order to get it done. We talked yesterday about doing everything as means to an end. And work is one of those things, working in order to get paid for it, or to get praise for it, admiration, or self-satisfaction, or just the release of tension that something is finished, only to start a new tension of what has to be started in order to get finished again. So can in a place like this, which has not been built in order to perpetuate our recent and ancient habits, but to look at them, to become aware of them. Not to hook into them and use them, but to expose them. Can one become aware of one's patterns of working and wonder whether there is working without a pattern, meaning doing something for its own sake, without any in order to. It's not so difficult. Once the awareness is there, how one rushes through something, slurs over it, the thoughts being with the end result or someplace else altogether, someplace where it's more pleasant in the imagination. And yet, one doesn't look, feel, is intimate with what the hands and the body are doing. When there's no slurring over one instant. So time expands infinitely for this one instant of washing something, wiping something, weeding, pulling a weed, pulling one weed, one lettuce leaf washed, the little bits in the grooves, the feel of the grooves and the rinsing of these little dark bits of earth. Whatever one may be doing, what is this instant? If nothing rushes away from it, if this is all there is, and not the idea of it, because if we raise the idea of it, this is all there is, with that usually comes a depressive feeling for people. Because then one can't see what is, one just thinks, oh my God, this is all there is this what? Is this what I came here for? Which is the blahness of thinking. The grayness, the lifelessness. But the cutting of the carrot or the wiping of the sink. Here, with this water we have, washing sinks is fun because there's something to wash away. Remember at home when I used to have to do things way back, or dust, there was never anything to dust because there was no dust. We dusted I don't know how many times a day. I always felt one day if I had my own place, I was going to listen to the airplane. I was going to wait till there was something to wipe away. So here with the mineral deposits in the water, these orange, gray, all color of drops and dried on in the sink, it's fun to wipe them. The shininess afterwards. Untouched, it looks untouched at the moment one leaves it. Because other thoughts that happen during work, particularly in everyday life, maybe here too, is why do I have to do this? Why couldn't I be given another job? Is this for people who have privileges here to have those jobs? And these thoughts come up. Nobody has said this to me. I'm just looking at the mind, how it runs and its disks. Most human beings don't love their work at all. They resent it, hate it, just doing it to get money. or position, prestige, status, and therefore hating what has no status and dreaming of what has status and prestige and trying to get there. Again, not doing the work that it takes to get there for its own sake, but as a means to an end, which cannot but be a constant drain and accumulation of frustration and ambition. Can one begin to see that, look into it, and question it thoroughly, deeply in oneself, if this is what happens in one's life? So one doesn't live the best years of one's life in alienation from one's work, which takes up a large time, 1/3 of the day, sometimes more. And then just grabbing onto vacation to get away from it, and the vacation again, not a moment-to-moment being with what's there, but trying to grab it, get something out of it, fearing that it's already over and has to go back to work. I think it's when time expands, when one is just there in the moment, then something changes in this moment. And what may have been unattractive or boring may not be that way, which doesn't mean that any kind of work can become attractive to one. It does not. I don't know. It's for each one to see. And then act out of that seeing. We'll take up a question now that was brought up in the meeting. This is frequently done in the talks, taking questions which were brought up in meetings. Please don't feel that an indiscretion is taking place because your question is being used. Nobody knows whose question it was anyways. And if one looks openly, one finds it's probably everybody's question anyways. Also, the questions are not remembered verbatim by me. I cannot do that. And may not do it because sometimes two similar questions are combined into one. So don't assume because your question is not exactly the way you put it that it was misunderstood. It's a new thing now that we're starting. This person said, aren't idealistic images necessary? You, Toni, seem to say they're not necessary or they're a hindrance. But don't we need idealistic images to propel us? For instance, to the sitting mat, to start questioning or meditating. How would I ever have come to this without an idealistic image of what could be attained, achieved on the mat? And another part of that question was, don't we need examples of teachers or spiritual leaders, or examples of people worthy of, person didn't say of imitating, but when I used that word, the person didn't object, didn't say, no, I didn't mean that. Worthy of following, of approaching, trying to be like them, or just allowing the inspiration of that image of a wholesome person to infuse the work, get us out of the doldrums going again, supply energy. Very likely the fact for all of us is that idealistic images have brought us to sit or to start a meditative practice. But just because that happened in the past does not mean that it is now a taboo to look at what an idealistic image does. Now, right now, as I'm sitting. If I don't look, if I don't question it, then I just continue the way I've been doing. And this person also mentioned, isn't there some value in continuing, because eventually we may get someplace. We may get to this point that the ideal is projecting. But if one looks very meticulously, carefully, right now, one sees that the ideal of enlightenment, liberation, wholeness, becoming a good, compassionate, loving person is idea. At this moment, is it? And can one see that at this moment, the idea of being such a person, becoming such a person, supplies energy, just like injecting something into a vein. Gives a boost. We don't like the idea of injecting something into the vein, but we don't mind the idea of using ideas to give us boosts, highs, or pull us out of an area at a time of depression, self-doubt, self-deprecation, or just plain boredom. And just as one gets addicted to drugs, one gets addicted to ideal images that the mind has to raise in order to give itself a push. That can be observed as it happens. A moment of deflation or low energy, boredom, and the mind scanning for something exciting to think about. It may not be the idea of enlightenment. That sometimes is the least exciting thing. One is sort of OD'd on that one. Now it is the next vacation, or a new relationship, the memory of this man or woman. We're not saying this is wrong or right, but see what it is. It is not being in touch with this low, this feeling of depression, the lack of energy, and plumbing that because it's there. We have no precedence in all of our upbringing and education to be with what's not exciting or not challenging, not interesting, what is depressing, or not that we have plenty of it, but our whole social upbringing is to get away from it, to entertain ourselves out of it. In one way or another. This is our idea of helping somebody most of the time, to cheer him up, cheer her up. Tell her things will be better in the future. You'll get over this one. I once visited a young man in the hospital who had made an attempt at suicide. Had slashed his wrist but was rescued. And we were just sitting together. I don't remember whether there was much conversation at all. But somebody had made him a beautiful little poster which he had sitting on his dresser, and it said, "This too will pass." Unless we really look right now, we could say, well, what's wrong with that? It's true. But there's a vast difference between something really passing, ending, finishing, and the mind latching on to an inspirational phrase. That's not the ending. It's just a continuation of the way we have lived. Not facing what's there, facing the mess, but entertaining ourselves out of it. We must be careful here not to interpret what is being said as that I'm advocating wallowing in our misery. I used to be accused of this a lot. I haven't heard it so much recently. You just tell people to wallow in their misery rather than just forget about it. Think of how to help someone else. How can one help someone else when one is in misery? I wonder if one does this in order to assuage the misery. But we're not talking about that right now. Wallowing in it is what? Again, using the present misery, feeling of depression, in order to get something out of it. The image of the victim We cling to that a lot, being victimized. And as a victim, we may garner some pity from others, some attention, or at least we can pity ourselves. Or we can believe that suffering is good for us. It's a very widespread ethic, the ethic of suffering. That if we're really suffering, eventually there'll be something good coming out of it. Again, the mind is split at this moment. You see that? Has the end in mind, the good that will come, the merits that I will gain by suffering. God will eventually reward me. He has sent this suffering to test me. And if I pass the test, then I'll get ahead. Maybe not here, but in heaven. Always to make something out of what's there, but not being with what's there without making anything out of it. Just leaving it there, but inundated or irradiated with awareness. It doesn't want to get anything out of it. Awareness is not of that nature. It is without purpose or end. It is without direction. It's without anything, without results, without motive. It's just attention. What's there? Like a mirror that shows up what's there. Without holding on or rejecting, without being enhanced or devalued. It just shows what's there, exactly as it's there. That state of being is a state of no conflict, no duality, no opposing, no resistance, no expectation. Not wanting anything, just the fullness of what's there. No evaluation of it. That's not attention, that's our background evaluating. But in attention, the background is unplugged. In this state of no division or separation whatsoever, what is there is not what we think is there. And therefore it has the freedom to change. We will take up the second part of the question tomorrow. End here for today.